In the meeting here and on the program, and what you've heard from a few people actually today, has been that we're on the cusp of change, that things are getting better. Well, I don't think they are. I think things are getting worse. You won't be able to read this email, but it's an email to Peter Goetze and I about a program that we were involved in, being made by ABC Australia. And here you see they're pulling out of the program. It's about the antidepressants. And there isn't anything particular being said in the program that's outrageous, but ABC feel they cannot make this program. They just cannot air anything remotely critical about the antidepressants at all. And the same week, I had this email came through to me, which is a Canadian company, again, saying they can't make a program about the antidepressants. It's a little bit more controversial because it's about the issue of, do the antidepressants cause people to become violent? They've made the program, but they've canned it. They've ditched it. They can't go ahead. And in roughly the same week, the person who I think has probably done more than anyone else, certainly I cannot think of anyone else in the world who's advanced the causes that are closest to your hearts and mine than this woman here, Shelley Joffrey, who works for the BBC, who made probably the programs about the antidepressants that have made most difference. Well, she got sacked. So I think things are getting worse, not better. I began talking about the antidepressants first and the issue about could they cause people to commit suicide. I was told, and you were told, we were all told that, well, these are just anecdotes. The controlled trials on the opposite side, the science shows that these drugs can't cause a problem like that. Shortly afterwards, we actually found that, in fact, the controlled trials and the science shows that drugs can cause a problem like that. But rather than the company saying, hey, what do you know, our drugs can cause these, they're into the business of saying, well, you know, did you take into account the fact that this guy had an ingrown toenail at the age of 8? And can you discount that and the fact that he went on to commit suicide? This is a Holocaust denialism type of mindset. We are getting nowhere. They are getting more and more brazen in terms of simply denying what's happening. Elsewhere, I've referred to the fact that we're in a totalitarian world. The control of the literature by industry and the media is complete as it ever was in Soviet Russia. We're facing brand fascism also. And it's worse over here. If you come from Europe to over here, one of the things that's quite striking is how scared doctors over here are of, say, the pharmaceutical companies, of being critical in any way. This is a very McCarthyist type atmosphere that we've got here. And there's a bunch of thugs that go with it who are happy to enforce it, to chuck people out of jobs, to harass critics, etc. We think if we get up and talk about the fact that Prozac causes people to commit suicide, that it's going to put people out there off having Prozac. But as a PR woman for Prozac in the UK told me years and years ago, oh, you're David Healy. I'm so pleased to meet you. You're doing more for the sales of Prozac than anyone else in the UK. In 2005, Paxil was about to get labeled pregnancy category D. This is, it causes birth defects. And the odds were that there would be a front page article, a little snippet in the front page of the New York Times saying Paxil causes birth defects. It's now being relabeled by the FDA as pregnancy category D. What's the GSK response? The GSK response is, this is a great time to sell Paxil. No one's been seeing the word at all for a while, but the word's going to be out there on the front page of the New York Times. This is the time to put on lecture tours, get David Cohen to come along and talk about the wonders of Paxil and all sorts of other people. Because the public see Paxil and Prozac. They don't see causes birth defects, causes dependence, causes suicide. They don't see it. We, the risk is for all of us, even with a program like this, and even with all of these talks being put up on the web, the risk is we're all just going to increase the sales of these drugs. We're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. I support the medical model. You'll have to wait till the end of the talk to see just what I mean by that. But I'm probably very bio. As you've heard, I support ECT. Again, you'll have to take that with a degree of caution. I've never called for a drug to be removed from the market ever, and I'm not sure I ever will. But part of what I'm trying to get at here is I'm part of the 99%. Most of the people out there whizzing by on the freeway, they believe in the medical model also. And if you think they're going to abandon it, I'm not sure they are. It offers too much hope. It offers a whole range of other things that most people think they need. In here in this room, we are part of the 1% or less, the 0.01%. And you really have to ask yourself, are people going to flip over just because a few people here in the room say, what do you know, the emperor has no clothes? Do you think Los Angeles is going to wake up tomorrow morning with the LA Times saying across the top page, emperor has no clothes scandal? It's not going to happen. But I think part of the problem that you've got with the medical model is you're dealing with what I would call the actuarial model. And that's one that I also have problems with, and I think we both share the same kinds of problems. To bring a drug on the market these days, we put them through controlled trials. Now, controlled trials, for the most part, have surrogate outcomes. These are not real outcomes. These aren't real-world outcomes. These are made-up outcomes. They're not good for patients. They're not good for doctors. They're not good for anyone except drug companies. The trials that get done, for the most part, the trials themselves are completely hidden. There's a proportion that you end up hearing about. They're the ones that are written up. But an awful lot of the ones that get done, you just simply don't hear about. In the case of all trials, the hidden or unhidden, there's no access to any of the data behind them. This is simply not science. In the case of all the trials that get published, they're ghost-written. I mean, again, this is incompatible with the norms of science. My problem with the RCTs and this quantitative approach that they've introduced is that it creates a scenario of risks. And it locates the risks in you and me, rather than the fact the risk from drugs to you is the fact that we don't have access to the data which shows what these drugs actually do. It locates the risk in you and it's going to be fixed by a drug, rather than locates the risk in the fact that the health services that you go to aren't treating you with a full range of options. It's a simple option to just turn to the drug. Beyond that, however, quite a few of you here in the room will be broadly evidence-based. John Reed's talk put forward the idea we, all of us here, want to be evidence-based. Now, I go a little further than most of you who think that way, in the sense of I don't think controlled trials work. They can be useful, but it's a tremendous symbol of just how they don't work. As of 1962, when they were brought in as means to control the access of drugs to the market, the only drug that had been through a placebo-controlled trial and came through and was shown to work well and to be extremely safe was thalidomide. The system we put in place to stop that happening again is one through which it sailed perfectly. And the other aspect of all this to take into account is the image you see there is the kind of image that you're aware of, that this drug causes, the issues that it causes. But this isn't an image from 1962. This is an image from the last few years in Brazil. This is happening worldwide at the moment. Babies are being born without limbs because this drug is on the market, various forms of it worldwide, and it's causing these kind of problems today in greater numbers than it ever caused in Europe during the 1950s and 1960s. And here in this room, we're focused on the concerns we have in the Western world. Well, they're only a fraction of the concerns that are happening worldwide. And we need to make sure we don't lose that focus. What have we done? Well, the kind of wisdom it was hoped that you'd get from the person on the left during the 1950s and the 1960s. We imprisoned that wisdom in a system designed for addicts. We made drugs available on prescription only, so every time you go to a doctor, you can feel it. You probably suppress it because the whole issue is so horrific you don't like the idea, but you are being treated as an addict every time you go to a doctor. Now, in this room, unlike me being bio, in this room for the most part you're probably much more mind-oriented. You want therapy and non-drug kind of options. And the debates get pitched to people who believe in that kind of approach versus the people who are biological, so-called. Well, in fact, I don't know if we're spiritual beings and we're all mind and no body, or if we're really all just bodies and there's nothing else apart from our bodies, or there's some mixture of the two. And I'm not sure we can ever reconcile that debate during our lifetime, or that we need to. I don't think it's a key issue. I think the key issue is power. It's not mind or body, it's power. Who has power over you? What does a doctor do that's different to a grandmother? Well, what they do is they poison you. And they mutilate you if they're surgeons, and every so often, if they're shrinks, they may shock you. What's the hallmark of a good doctor? Well, when you define it that way, it becomes obvious that the principal hallmark has to be that this is a person who knows when not to poison you. She has this option, but the key thing about her is she has the wisdom to know when not to do it. Just like the surgeon who knows when not to mutilate you. As things stand at the moment, doctors are experts on the 1% of things that a drug does. They've lost the expertise they had before, which was this drug was a poison. It does 100 things, and the 99 other things, other than the one thing that the pharmaceutical companies want you to focus on, the 99 other things may be much more important to you and to her than the one thing the industry wants you to focus on. Risk has got all the FDA data on the adverse events on drugs. People think for the most part that adverse event reports are just cranks. Even good people, the kind of people we have here in the room, will often, if you ask them about what's on risk, they'll say there's adverse event data, but that's just the kind of stuff written in by cranks. It's not. It's written in by the experts on the 99 things the drug does, other than the one thing the industry wants you to know about. But risk is not just information about these things. It's an invitation to you and all of us to do things. And it's to report on the adverse events on a drug to increase the knowledge we have, but also to generate a risk report, which you're going to take to the doctor who's put you on drugs. Now, in a meeting like this, we often have people who've been mentally ill who say, look, I've got lived experience. And you've got people who haven't been mentally ill who defer to the lived experience of people who've been there and been through what it's like. But in this area, every single one of you in the room has had lived experience. You don't want to retreat in this instance into a mental illness ghetto. It's all of health. Whatever drug you put on, whether it's maybe one of the statins or a respiratory drug or whatever, it can cause adverse events. It can change your personality. And if you go along to a doctor and try and report this, you're going to find that he or she is going to regard you as an addict, and they're actually going to turn extraordinarily nasty for the most part. You'll find it's a scary experience. What we're hoping you're going to do is not just to take the report to the doctor, but to report back on whether they listen or not. I get repeatedly asked, does anyone know, do I know a good doctor in Los Angeles that I can go to with my problems? Do I know a good doctor in Minneapolis? And I don't. But we can build maps of good doctors. Now, doctors, for the most part, it's 10%, 80%, and 10% bunch of people. There's 10% who simply won't listen to you and shouldn't be practicing medicine. There's a further 10% who, if you come along and report an adverse event, just constitutionally, if you come along and report an adverse event to them, they'll say, well, that's very interesting. What do you know? We gave you a poison, and you're poisoned. That's really interesting. Let's hear more. Okay, we can move things forward. And then there's the 80% in the middle who are up there for grabs. These are the ones that the pharmaceutical industry has at the moment. And these are the ones that you can help move back to where you want them to be. Because if we, as patients, only go along to the ones who listen, a lot of the 80% are going to realize they have to change. This quote sounds extraordinarily violent. If you check on Wikipedia where the quote comes from, it'll tell you it comes from Emile Zapata in 1920. It doesn't. It comes from the Irish Land League in 1870, a good year. This is the group of people who created the boycott. This is the group of people who created the hunger strike. This is the group of people who created non-violent resistance, who influenced Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. What we need now is a version of what they did then, but rather than not talk to the pharmaceutical companies about what their drugs really do, we need to talk, and this is what risk is about. You need to tell them what the full range of things are that these drugs do, and if you talk and they don't listen, you've got to shout, and keep shouting. Thank you.